Hello and welcome. In this video, we're going to build a REST API using Node.js, Express, and MongoDB. If you don't know what is a REST API, there's a video here on the channel explaining the basics of REST by building a complete CRUD example. I'll leave the link on the description below. But on the example we built on the video, we're not using a database to store the data. For this current video, we'll be using MongoDB, which is a document database. It stores data in JSON format called BSON. It's a database based on a no-relational document model, and it's also called NoSQL database. It differs fundamentally from conventional relational databases such as Oracle, MySQL, Postgres, or Microsoft SQL Server. We'll be using a service called MongoDB Atlas, which is basically a Mongo database on the cloud. We can also install MongoDB on our personal machine or on a server, but for learning purposes, we'll be using Mongo Atlas, which is easy to configure, and there's a free plan that we can use as well. You can visit MongoDB official website for further information, which is mongodb.com. And to connect MongoDB to our Node project, we'll be using a module called Mongoose that provides a higher level abstraction layer for MongoDB. You can visit Mongoose official website, which is mongoosejs.com, and you can check the complete documentation by clicking on Read the Docs. You can see some examples here as well for Node. I really encourage you guys to check Mongoose website because Mongoose make things a lot easier for us on the back end. We're gonna see along the video. So let me close the Mongoose website here, and let's start by creating our database on the MongoDB website. First thing we need to do is to create an account if you don't have one yet. On MongoDB official website, you can click on Try Free button on the top, and you can sign up with your Google personal account or enter your personal information, and you can sign up with your personal email and password. Once you're done, you can click on Create Your Atlas account. I already have an account, so let me sign in with one of my personal accounts here. So the email, and click on Next, and enter the password, and click on Login. Okay, so this is the MongoDB Atlas dashboard, and if you check here on the top, there's a drop-down containing all projects we have. MongoDB Atlas already created a project for us by default, which is Project 0. We can rename this project to something else by clicking on View All Projects, and on the project list, which we have just one, select the project and click on the three-dot button on the end. Then select the Edit Project option. It's going to show a dialog so we can enter the new name of our project. So I'll just put here main project in upper camel case, but you can put any name you like. Okay, perfect. So let's click on our main project to create our database. And to do so, we need to create a MongoDB cluster, which is a term used for a database replica set or shared deployments in Mongo Atlas. A cluster is a distributed set of servers used for data storage. So to create a new cluster, we can click here on Create, or we can go on the left menu here under Deployment, click on the Database option, and on Build a Database button here. Okay, so when you sign in for the first time, this is the page that you might see first. Okay, so to create the database, we need to select one of the plans here on the top, and we'll select the last one, which is a free plan. Next, we need to select a provider, and we have AWS, Google Cloud, or Azure. I'll just leave as AWS. Next, we need to select a region where our database will be stored. Make sure to select a region that is close to where you are. I'm in São Paulo, Brazil right now, so by default, Mongo Atlas selected the closest region. So I'll just leave as it is. Next, we need to give a name to our cluster. By default, Mongo Atlas add the name as cluster 0, so let's change to main cluster, upper camel case as well, but feel free to put any name you like. And the last option, we can add some tags to our cluster, but this is optional, so I'll just leave without it. We can go ahead and click on Create. Okay, so on the next page, we need to enter some security settings here. First, we need to specify a username and a password to access our database. By default, the username is the same as your email address, but we can change if we want. I'll just put manfra here. And for the password, we can click on auto-generate secure password to generate a random password, or we can enter one. I'll just add manfra123 because it's easy to remember and we'll be using this information to connect to our database. Okay, so we can click on create user. And next, we need to specify the IP addresses that can access our database. By default, Mongo Atlas already added my IP address here, but let's say we deployed our Node project on a different server, so we need to add the IP address for that server as well. We can add the IP address and add a description so we know from who that IP address is. If your IP address is not down here, so for example, let me remove my IP address here, then we can click on add my current IP address to add it to the list. So now our computer have access to our cluster where will be our databases as well. We can click now on finish and close to complete the cluster creation. It will show a success dialog. We can click on go to overview. And perfect. So we're back on the Mongo Atlas dashboard, but now we have our main cluster here and we can create multiple clusters, but on the free plan, we can only have one. And to connect to our cluster, we can click on the connect button here and it will show a dialog with different ways to connect. So for example, we can click here on drivers option to connect to our Node project. It will show the steps that we need, but we'll be using this option later on the video. For now, we'll need a software to check our database and all its data. And a good and free option that we have is called Compass. So let's click on the Compass option here. And Compass is a powerful GUI for querying and analyzing our Mongo database in a visual environment. So if you don't have Compass installed, you can click on I don't have MongoDB Compass installed and you can select the operation system that you're using here on the drop down and click on the download Compass button. Once you have Compass installed, you can click here on I have MongoDB Compass installed button and it will show a connection string to connect Compass to our cluster. So let me open Compass here. And this is the first screen that will appear once you open Compass for the first time. And let me copy that connection string by clicking here on the copy icon. And back on Compass, as you can see here, we have a text field to add the URI, which is the connection string under the new connection option. So let's paste the connection string here. Okay, perfect. Now we need to change the password variable that we have over here to the password we created for our manfra user, which is manfra123. Now we can click on connect and perfect. So we connected MongoDB Compass to our MongoDB cluster. And as you can see here, by default, MongoDB created two databases, which are admin and local. These are internal databases. We should not touch them unless advised by MongoDB support or special admin tasks. So let's just ignore them. And to create our own database, we can click here on the plus sign next to the databases option. It will show a create database dialog where we can enter the name of our database and our first collection as well. So collection is the same as a table on a SQL database. Here on MongoDB, the tables are called collections. But for now, we won't create our database here on Compass. We'll create directly from our Node project using Mongoose. So let me close this dialog and the connection dialog on MongoDB Atlas as well. So our MongoDB cluster is created and ready to use. So let's get started on coding. I'll be using VS Code for the tutorial, but feel free to use any code editor you like. And here on VS Code, I have a folder open called rest_API_Node.js_MongoDB. You can put any name you like. The folder is empty. We're going to create everything from scratch. Let's start by creating our Node project. I'll click here on the top to open the terminal. And the command to create a new Node.js project is npm init. And if we hit enter, it's going to ask a few questions like the name of the project, the author, if there's a Git repo. We can leave everything as the default answer. So we can add a flag, which is -y to answer everything as default. And we can change this information later. So hit enter and perfect. As you can see, we have a new package JSON file, which contains all information from our project. and we can change this anytime. All the dependencies we'll install will be on this file as well. Let's do that now actually. Let's install the modules we'll be using. So back on the terminal, let me clear this. And to install dependencies, we can type npm install. And the first module we'll be installing is Express, which is a framework to handle routes, requests, and responses easier. And of course, there's a lot more features. And the next module is Mongoose to handle the connection with MongoDB and also manipulate data. Really easy to use, we'll see during the video. So now just hit enter to install these dependencies. And perfect. As you can see in the package.json file, we have the dependencies Express and Mongoose inside the dependencies object. And there's also a field here called main, which is equals to index.js. So this will be the main file of our project, the starting point. We can change the name if we want, but I'll leave as it is. So we need to create this file in the root of our project. So here on the root, right click, new file, and the name will be index.js. Great, so like I said before, this will be our main file. So let me close the terminal and the package.json file, and let's work only on the index.js file. So the first thing we need to do is to import Express here on the top. So const express equals to require Express. Okay, I'll import Mongoose as well right below the Express import. So const Mongoose equals to require Mongoose. Great. Next, we need to initialize Express by calling the Express as a function, and we'll store inside a constant. So const app equals to Express function. Okay, finally Express needs to listen to a specific port so our server can run. So below the Express initialization, I'll call app.listen, and the first parameter will be the port number. So I'll just put 3000 here. And the second parameter is a callback. If everything is running, I'll just put a message on the console. So I'm going to put here the arrow function and console.log, and inside I'll just put a message here saying server started on port 3000. Okay, great. So let me save this file and let's run everything on the terminal to see if it's working. So I'll open the terminal here on the top, and let me clear this first. And the command to run this file is node index.js. Hit enter and perfect. As you can see, server started on port 3000. That means our server is working. And let me stop the server by pressing Ctrl C. And right below the Express initialization, let's create our first route. And it's going to be a get route. Okay, so app.get. And the name of this route is just going to be a slash. That means it's going to be the home route. Okay. And next, we'll receive here two parameters. The first one is going to be the request. And the second parameter is going to be the response. Okay, so now I'm going to put an arrow function here. So the request is everything that the front end sent to us, like a JSON or a parameter in the URL, and we can manipulate inside the function here. And the response is what we need to send back to the client with the status code, maybe a message or a data, and we're going to do all this inside this function. So let's do that right now. Let's send a response to the client. So response.send. And inside, we'll just send a message here saying something like success. Okay, perfect. So let's test all these changes. I'm going to save the file, and back on the terminal, I'm going to run again node index.js. Hit enter. Okay, server started. And to test the routes, I'll use a software called Postman. Postman is a tool to test HTTP requests. There are other softwares out there, so feel free to use one that you like. To open a new HTTP request, we can click on the plus sign on the top bar. This will open a new tab here, and we can choose the HTTP method here on the drop down, and we also have the URL field here. Let's type the home route that we created. So HTTP :// column and the port number, which is 3000. To test this, we can click on send on the top right, And perfect. So we got the response message success and a status code 200 OK, which indicates that we got a success response. Great. So back on VS Code, we need to configure Express to accept JSON requests from the client. In our case, is Postman. So below Express initialization, let's call app.use and inside express.json function. Okay, so let's change our route to accept a request body from the client. Let's change the method here from get to post. And inside the route, let's log the request body to see if everything is working. So console.log and request.body. Great. So let me save this file and back on the terminal, let me stop the server, Ctrl+C and type again node index.js. Hit enter. Okay, server started. Back on Postman. Now here on the method dropdown, let's change this to post. And we need to send a JSON body to the server. To send data, we can click on the body tab. And there's different ways to send data to the server. We'll choose the raw option here. And on the drop-down field, we can choose different body types. Well, we'll leave the default, which is JSON. Now we need to type a JSON object here. So inside curly brackets, let's add a field here, which needs to be inside double quotes. So for example, the name field, which is equals to a string. So double quotes again, and inside, for example, I'll put Node.js course. And let's add another field, so comma, and the next field will be the price, okay, which is equals to 97.99. Okay, perfect. So let's click on send and great, we got a success response. Now back on VS Code, here is the JSON body we just sent from Postman with the name and the price. Now we can manipulate this data inside the route to insert or update our Mongo database. Awesome. So before we proceed, let's install a module that will watch for changes on our code and stop and restart the server for us. Because every time we need to test something, we have to open the terminal, stop, and start the server again by typing node index.js. So the module or dependency is called nodemon, and it's going to be a development dependency. So let me stop the server here and type npm install nodemon. And let's add the development flag here, which is --save--dev. Hit enter and great. Now, if we check here inside our package JSON file, we'll see that nodemon is under the dev dependencies object. That means that when we add this project in production, only the dependencies object will be installed and not the dev dependencies. These are just for development purposes. Now, to configure nodemon, as you can see, we have an object here called script. We can get rid of this test script here, and let's add another script to handle nodemon. I'll call start. And the command, instead of node index.js, we're going to type nodemon index.js. And to run this script, let's go back to the terminal. Let me clear this. And the command will be npm start. Hit enter, and nodemon will restart the server for us every time we save a file. So let's test nodemon here on the index.js file. Inside our route, I'll change the response message to hello world. Now, when I save this file, here on the terminal, nodemon will restart the server for us. And back on Postman, I'll just click on send. And there we go. We got the hello world response message. So nodemon is working perfectly, and we can even close the terminal for now. Perfect. Now we can actually connect Mongoose to our cluster we created earlier. So below the express JSON configuration, I'm going to call the Mongoose module. So mongoose.connect. And the first parameter here is going to be the URI, that means the connection string. That connection string, we can get it on the MongoDB Atlas dashboard. So let's go back to the website. I'll click on the connect button and select the drivers option. And as you can see, the first drop down here is the technology we're using. I'll leave as the default, which is Node.js. And the next drop down is the version of the driver, and I'll leave the latest as it is. So the example MongoDB Atlas is showing here is using the MongoDB module directly and not Mongoose, but the connection string is the same for both these modules. So let's copy this connection string by clicking on the copy icon And back on VS Code, let's paste the connection string inside the Mongoose connect function. And we can remove these configurations on the end of the URI after the last slash, because we won't use it. Now we need to change the password placeholder here to the password we created, which is manfra123. If you notice, this is the same connection string we used on Compass. So this connection string is to connect to our cluster. A cluster can have multiple databases, so we need to specify a database here on the connection string. If this database doesn't exist, so Mongoose will create for us. We can specify the name of the database after the last slash here. So let's call our database my_API. Perfect. So we didn't create this database on Compass or directly on Mongo Atlas dashboard. So Mongoose will create for us. Now we can specify an event on Mongoose to check if the connection was successful or if there is an error. To add events on Mongoose, we can call the Mongoose module .connection.on. And the first parameter is the name of the event. And it's a string, so I'll add here connected. And the second parameter is a callback function. So if the connection is successful, let's add a message on the console. So console.log, and in here I'll just put Mongoose connected. Okay. And our server will only start if Mongoose connection is successful. So I'll cut the express.listen and I'll paste inside the callback function of the success event. Okay, perfect. Now we need to create another event if there's an error in the connection. So right below the success event, I'll add another one. So on Mongoose.connection.on, and the name of the event is error. And the second parameter is also a callback function. So let me put here the arrow function, but now it will return an error object. So let me put error here as a parameter. And inside this function, I'll write a message on the console. So console.log, and I'll just put Mongoose connection error and column and a comma here with the error object. Okay, perfect. So let's test our connection, and I'll open the terminal again. And when I save this file, NodeMon should restart the server for us, and we should see some message on the console if it was success or not. So Ctrl S to save, and there it is. Mongoose connected, and the server was started successfully as well. So the connection between Mongoose and MongoDB Atlas is complete. Now let's simulate an error here to see if the error event will be fired. So here in the connection string, I'll change the password and I'll remove the 3 here on the end. And save. Okay, so now we got the complete error object here showing what went wrong with the connection. And here on the top is the Mongoose connection error message saying authentication failed. Great, so both Mongoose events are working. And let me change the password here to the correct one. Save, and everything is working again. Great, so we create a new database called my_API, and we need to create a collection for this database. So let me just close the terminal here. And with Mongoose, we can create something called a schema, which defines the structure and property of a document inside the collection. So comparing with a SQL database, collection is the same as a table, and a document is the same as a row inside that table. So all schema files will create inside a directory called models. Mongoose model is a wrapper on the Mongoose schema. So let's create this directory inside the root, right click, new folder, and we'll call this models. And inside this folder, let's create a new file with the name of our first collection, which is product.js. So it's a good practice to name all model files starting with an uppercase. And we'll see the reason for this further on the video. So inside this file, we specify the fields that our document will have, like name of the product, price, description, quantity, and others. So let's start by importing Mongoose module on the top. So const Mongoose equals to required Mongoose. Next, we'll define our schema. So const product schema equals to new Mongoose dot schema. Okay, so this is a function, and inside we'll have an object with the fields and their types. So the first field we'll add is the name. And name will receive an object with some options here. And the first option is going to be the type, and it's going to be equals to string. And this will be a required field. So the next option we'll put here required, true. And by default, required is always false. So let's add another field or property. And after the name object, I'll add a comma, and this one is going to be description. And description will also receive an object with the type option, and it's also going to be a string. And this is not a required field, so we'll just leave the type option here. And since we don't have any other options, we can remove the object and put string directly here. Okay, perfect. So comma, and the next field is going to be the price. And price is going to receive an object with the type as number. And number can be a float, a decimal. We can use for integer as well, but we might need to add some validation here. So let's leave as number. And this is also going to be required. So required true. Okay, so let's add another field here. And the next one is going to be the quantity, like the quantity we have in stock. And this one will receive an object. And the type, I'm going to put as number as well, but there is a big int option here. Okay, so I'm just going to leave as number for standard. And we have a default option here, which is the default value if we don't pass this field when inserting a product. Okay, so for the default option, I'll put 0 here. So we won't have null values for the quantity, only 0. Okay, so let's add one more field, and this one is going to be the active field if we're still working with this product or not. Okay, so this is going to receive an object, and the type, it's going to be a Boolean field. Okay, so only true or false, and the default for this field is going to be true. Okay, so if we don't pass the active, it's going to be true. So let's add another field, which is the category, and this one is going to receive the object as well with the type as string, and this is also required, so required equals to true. And we're going to have different types of categories like electronics, courses, books maybe. So for this field, we're going to add a none option. The none validator is an array that will check if the value given is an item of this array. So a none will receive an array, and we're going to add the categories here inside. Since the category property type is a string, so the items inside the array should be a string as well. So the first category is going to be electronics, and the next one is going to be books, and let's add a third one here, which is going to be accessories. Perfect. Okay, so this is how we define a none validator here for the category field. Okay, I think we have enough fields here to work with. So all fields are defined inside the product schema object. Now we need to export this schema so we can add on our Mongo database and also use in other files. So here on the bottom, let's add module.exports equals to, and to export this, we're gonna put mongoose.model. And this is a function that will have two parameters. The first parameter is the name of the collection, and the second is the product schema that we created here on the top. So the collection name is product with capital P or not, it doesn't matter. And the second parameter is the product schema. So we are attributing to the product collection the product schema that we defined it here. Perfect, so now it's time to use this schema and insert, read, update, and delete products on our database. We'll create different routes to do all these CRUD operations. So let's open the index.js file, and let me remove these blank spaces here. Okay, now on the post route we already have, let's use this route to receive data from the client and insert into the products collection. So let's rename this route to, instead of being just slash, we're gonna put the resource name, which is products. And as I explained on the REST API video, we can put products on plural or not, it's up to you. Just make sure to use the same for all routes. So the post method on the route is usually used to insert data into a resource. In our case, is the product. And we're going to use the product schema to do that. So let's import the product schema, which is inside the product.js file here on the top. So const product with a capital P equals to require. So the index.js file is on the root. So we need to access the models folder. Okay, to do that, we're gonna put dot slash, and we have access to everything on the root. So models slash product. Perfect. Now inside the post route, we'll add the data from the request body that the client will send into the product collection. So let me select all the code that we have inside the route and we can remove it. Okay, so to create or insert a new product, let's call the product schema here. So product dot create function, and inside we have to send a JSON object with the same fields we define on the schema file. We can get this JSON object on the request object of the route that the client will send to us. So let's add here request dot body. Okay, the create function returns a promise. So if everything worked, we can add a dot here, then, and this returns a callback function with a parameter, which is the new product object we just created. So let's add a arrow function here with the new product object as a parameter. And let's return this new product object to the client, calling the response object. So inside the function, return response dot status, and we'll add the status to 101, which means created. Whenever we create something on the backend, it's a good practice to send 201 status code. And we're gonna also send a JSON response with the new product object we just created. Let me copy and paste here inside. Perfect. Now, if something went wrong, we can add a dot here, catch, which also returns a callback function. So arrow function here, but this time the parameter is going to be an error object. So in this case, we'll return to the client the response dot status 500, which means a server internal error, with a JSON response with the error message. So error equals to the error object of the function dot message. Okay, so the create product post route is done for now. So let's test on Postman. And here in the URL field, I'll just add the slash products. And here on the JSON body object, I'll leave the name as it is and the price as well. And let's check on the product schema, the rest of the fields we defined. And we have the description field. So below the name field, I'll add description. And for example, I'll just put here node course description, just for example. And back on the schema, the price is already here on the body. So comma, and the next field is the quantity. So quantity, and I'll put 10 here. Okay. The next is the active field. And by default is already true, but I'll add it on the body anyway. So active, true. And the next field is the category, and it have to be one of these three options here. So category, and since this is a course, I'll put on the book category. Okay, all fields are on the body, and let's click on send. And perfect, we got the new product as a response with all the details we defined. And note that Mongo created two new fields here for us. One is the ID, which is a unique field that acts as a primary key of the document. So by default, if we don't specify this field in the schema, Mongo creates automatically for us. And the type is not a string as it looks. It's a object ID type. We'll see later on the video how to validate this. Just note that for every collection or table, if you're using a SQL database, we must define a primary key. And Mongo already does this for us. And the second field is the underscore V, which means version key. It describes the internal revision of a document. By default, it's 0, and it only increments when an array inside the document is updated. We're not going to use this field, so we can just ignore it. And we also can configure on Mongoose to exclude this field from the collection. But we'll just leave as it is. Now, let's check on Compass to see if our database is created. Here on the top, we can click on the options and reload data to refresh. And here's the My API database. If we expand this, here's the products collection and the document inside, just like the response we got on Postman. Perfect, so everything is working, our post route is working. Now, on the Mongoose schema, we can configure lots of things. And a very good practice is to always save the date and time of the document when it was created or last updated as well. But we don't need to define these fields manually. There's an option on Mongoose that we can configure, and Mongoose will create these fields for us automatically. So after the fields definition, we can add another object, and there's an option called timestamps, which is false by default, but if we put as true, Mongoose will create the create at and the update at field. And Mongoose will also fill in these fields when we insert or update a document. So now that we added the timestamp option as true, let's create another product on Postman to see what happens. So for the name here, I'll just change to JavaScript course, and the description, I'll just put JavaScript course description. The price is going to be $50.99. I'll leave the quantity, the active, and the category as it is, and let's click on send. Awesome. Here's the new product object with all the details we entered, and here are the created at and the updated at fields, both with the same date and time. So the create will never change unless we change manually, and the updated at will only change when we update a product. Perfect. Let's check on Compass. So we can click here on the find button to refresh the data. And here's the new product with the timestamps field. Note that the first product doesn't have these fields because we created before adding the timestamp configuration on the schema. So the timestamp configuration is working. Let's go back on the post route to change a few things here. So we're handling the responses inside the callback function of the create method, but we can change this route to be asynchronous. That means we'll call the create method and we're gonna wait till it finishes, and then depending on the result, we can return a success response or catch the error to return the error response. So let's do that right now. I'll add some extra spaces here. And to make this function asynchronous, before the function, we need to add the async word here, right before the request and response parameters. Now, inside the route function, we need to add a try and a catch block here. The catch block will have an error object as a parameter, so it will try to create the product. If something goes wrong, it will fall into the catch block here. So what we can do is grab the error response we already added here on the create catch callback and paste inside the catch of the route function. Now inside the try block, we're going to create our product. And for that, we'll start a new product object inside a constant. So const, and I'll call new product as well, just like the one we already had. And since this is a asynchronous function, we need to wait for the promised result of a function. In our case, the create function. So we need to add the await word before the promises. And then product.create with the request.body, just like we added before. And if everything works, and then we can return a success response. So I'll just grab the success response we already have over here and paste right below the constant new product. And now we can get rid of all this piece of code here. So this is how async and await methods work. We should handle asynchronous functions inside a try-catch block. We're not gonna get deep into asynchronous or promises explanations. We're gonna use this in all routes of our API, so we'll get more and more familiar with this. Let's just make sure everything's working. Back on Postman, let's create another product. So I'll just change the name here to laptop and the description to laptop description. The price to 400, the quantity to 4, and I'm gonna remove the active here since it's already true by default. And the category is electronics. Click on send, and here's the laptop product details. Note that the active is true here by default. And note the ID as well, so everything is good. Now back on Compass, let's click on find. And here's the new laptop product. So the async and await we added on the route is working perfectly. Now back on Postman, the name field we added on the product schema is required. So let's see what happens if we remove the name field from the body object and click on send. We got a status code of 500 and a Mongoose error message saying product validation failed. So we need to send a better response to the client with the correct status code. Back on the post route, let's add validations to all required fields. So above the create method on the const new product, I'll add an if statement checking if the request.body.name is undefined by adding an exclamation sign on the beginning. So if the name inside the request body is not there, let's return a response to the client. So return response.status, and the code for this, it can be 422, which means unprocessable entity. And every time the client sends invalid data to the backend, we can return this code. And also a JSON response with an error message inside the object. So error, and the message will be name field is required. Great. Since we add the return word here before the response, so the rest of the code won't be executed. Back on Postman, if we try to send the body object now, we got a status code of 422 and the error message saying name is required. So our validation is working. Now let's check here on the product schema, all fields we define as required. So besides the name, we add the price and the category as well. So we need to add validation for both of these fields. So back on the post route, I'm just gonna copy the if statement we added for the name. And I'm just going to paste below here, and I'm going to change the name here to price. And the same for the error message inside the response. So price field is required, and we need to add the validation for the category as well. So I'm just going to copy this one again and paste right below. Now price becomes category, and for the error message, category field is required. So let's test these new validations on Postman, and we already tested the name field. So I'll put the name back here, and I'll type laptop, comma, and let's remove the price now. Okay, let's click on send. And great, we got the 422 and price field is required. So let's add the price back again, and let's remove the category field. Okay, click on send again. Same thing, 422 category field is required. So perfect, all the validations from the post route is working. And let me add the category field back here. And on the product schema, we define some categories inside the unknown validator. So the category have to be one of these three options we added inside the array. So on Postman, if we try to add a different category here, let's say food, which is not on the list, and we click on send, again, we got a 500 status code and an error message from Mongoose. So we should definitely add a validation for this as well and send the correct response to the client. So back on the post route, let's check if the client is sending a category that's not on the unknown array. So this first if statement is checking if the category is not defined on the body. If it is, we can add a else if statement here. So else if, and now we need to grab the categories in the unknown array and check if the category that is defined on the request body doesn't exist on the array. So I'll add a exclamation sign here. And to get the array of categories available, we can call the products schema.path. And inside the path method, we have to add the category field. The schema.path can be used to inspect the schema type and validator for a given path or field, in this case, the category. And it returns information from the schema. So after the path here, we can add a dot and none values in camel case. So this line of code here will return the array we define in the none inside the category field in the product schema. So since this is an array, we can add a dot includes here. The includes method checks if an array includes a certain value among the entries, returning true or false. So we need to add here the category inside the request body, I'll just copy here and paste inside the includes method. So we can read this else if statement as if the category in the request body is not included on the unknown array, and then we need to return the correct response to the client. So let me copy the response we have up here and let me paste inside the else if statement. The 422 will be the same, but let's change this error response message here. It's a good practice to always send the response containing complete information to the client. So I'll add backticks here, and we can send the categories available in the response so the client knows which categories it can send. So let's send a message here, for example, category must be one of these options. And let's put the $sign here and the curly brackets. And now we can send a list of categories that the client is allowed to send. So let me copy the piece of code that returns the categories in an array and paste inside the curly brackets here. Perfect, but this will return an array inside the message. What we can do here is put a .join, and the join method returns a string by concatenating all elements of an array separated by a specific separator string. So join takes only one parameter, which is the separator. So let's add a comma here and a blank space. Great, so let's see how this response message will look on the client. Back on Postman. So the category here, I'll leave as food and click on send, and perfect. Here's the status code 422 with the message category must be one of these options: electronics, books, accessories. Now the client knows which categories it can send. So let's change here from food to electronics and click on send. And perfect, we got status code 201 and the new product here with all the details. And let's check on Compass. So we have 3 products, but if we click on find, now we have 4. And here's the new laptop product. And actually we have a duplicate product here, but with different IDs. We could add more validations here on the post route, but that depends on your REST API architecture. It's very important to send a complete response to the client informing what it have to do next in case there is a validation error. Perfect, so we have an endpoint to create a new product, and we are checking on Compass all products recreated. But we need an endpoint to get all products recreated. So let's create a new route here below the post route. So app dot, and now it's gonna be a get route. And the name of this route will also be /products. Just like the post route we created, the name of the route should always refer to the resource. And the get route will also be asynchronous, so async. And the same parameters here, the request and the response. And let's add a arrow function here. Okay, and now we need to add the try and the catch block here. So try and the catch here with the error object as a parameter. We're gonna add the try catch block to all async routes. And inside the catch block, we'll always have the same response, returning 500 as the status code and the error message as well. So let me copy the one that we already have here on the post route, and let's paste here on the get route. Okay, now inside the try block, we're gonna get all products and return to the client. To do so, let's create a new const that will hold all products as an array. So const products equals to await, because this will return a promise, the product schema dot, and we're gonna use the find method here. The find method is used to fetch data from the collection. In a SQL database, it's similar to the select command. We can add a filter inside as a parameter to fetch a particular object, but in this case, we want to fetch all products. So we don't need a filter here, and we can live without a parameter. Great, so the find method return an array, and all we need to do is return to the client. So return, response, and the status code, we're gonna put 200 here, which means okay. And it's the default code if we don't specify a status code on the response. And we're also gonna send a JSON response. And inside, we're just gonna put the products const that we created holding all products. Okay, perfect. So this route is ready to test. We can go back to Postman. And let's open a new tab here by clicking on the plus sign to open a new request. And let's copy the URL from the post endpoint we already have and it's gonna be the same URL, but it's a get method now. So we'll paste here, and we can click directly on send, and perfect. We got the 200 status code, okay, and the array containing all products we created with all fields inside the objects. Great, so our get route is working, but we can actually specify the fields we want to return. So inside the get route, after the find method, we can add a dot here, and there's a method called select. Select is a method of Mongoose that is used to select document fields that are to be returned in the result. So we can specify the fields separated by a white space inside a string. So let's say we want to return the ID, the name, and the price, okay? All separated by a white space here. And let's test to see how it looks on Postman. So we can click directly on send, and here it is. The objects now have the ID, the name, and the price, just like we specified on the select. And we can also exclude a field from the object. All we have to do is add a dash or a minus sign in front of the field name. So for example, we don't want to send the version key field. So we can put a dash __ v here. So now we are removing the version key from the result query here. Let's test on Postman, click on send, and now we have all fields inside the products object, except the version key field. Awesome, let's leave the response like this. Now, what if the client wants to get details from a specific product? So it might need to send a parameter, which usually is the primary key or a field that is unique for each product. So we can fetch that particular product by that unique field. In our case, we can use the ID field, which is the primary key and it's unique for each product. So let's create a new route here that's going to return only a specific product to the client. So below the get all products route, app, dot, and it's going to be also a get route, and the name is the same, so /products. But this time the client needs to send a parameter, which is going to be the ID of the product. And to configure parameters in a URL, we can put a slash here, column, and the name of the parameter, which is ID. And we're gonna see soon how to handle the parameter from the URL. And this will be asynchronous as well, so async with the same parameters, the request and the response. An arrow function here, and inside, just like the other routes, we're gonna put the try and the catch block here as well. And the catch block with the error object, and we're gonna copy the same error response that we are using in other routes and paste on the catch block of this new route. Now, similar to the get all products route, we're gonna create a constant that's gonna hold the specific product object that the client requests. So const product, and this will be an object, and it's equals to await because it's going to return a promise. The product schema. Now here's the reason why the schema name here should be capitalized, because we're instantiating the const called product. So the product schema should be upper camel case, and the const or variable that is an instance of the product schema should be the same name but in lower camel case. Great, so here on the product schema, dot, and to get a product by its ID, there's a method here on Mongoose which is called find by ID. And as the name already says, it's a function used to find one document by its ID. It returns an object with details of a document, in our case the product. And for the parameter here, it's the product ID, which we're gonna get from the parameter on the URL. And to get the ID parameter, we can call the request object dot params. And if we put a dot here, it's going to show all parameters we define. In our case, just the ID parameter. Same as the parameter in the URL. Great. Now all we have to do is return the specific product to the client. So return response dot status, and the code is 200 OK, and the JSON response, it's the product const we define up here. Let's test this new route on Postman, and let's grab an ID here of one of the products, the Node.js course here, for example. Let's open a new request, and the URL will be the product's URL, but we'll add a slash here on the end and paste the Node.js course ID here. Now let's click on send, And perfect. Here's the 200 OK status code and all the details from the Node.js course. So everything's working with our new route. And note that the find by ID method, it's similar to the find method that we use on the previous route. That means we can also add a dot select here to select the fields we need. So let's do exactly like we did before. Let's remove the version key field. And let's test on Postman, but let me get the ID of another product here to test. Let's get the JavaScript course ID. And let's paste here on the URL parameter, click on send, and perfect. So we got the JavaScript course object here with all the details except the version key field. So the select function is working as well on this new route. Now, what if the client sent an ID that doesn't exist? So for example, I'll change the last char here to 0, click on send, and we got 200 status code OK, but we got null on the response. So we definitely had to handle a better response to the client. So what we need to do here is just check if the constant product that we define here is null. So I'll add an if statement, and I'll put the exclamation sign and the product constant. So if the product constant is not there, and then we can return response.status, and we can use the 404 status code, which means not found. And also a JSON response as well with an error saying product not found. Okay, very simple. Let's check on Postman. I'll just click on send. And perfect, we got the 404 not found status code and the error message product not found. So our validation is working perfectly. Now the ID on Mongo, it's not a string, it's an object ID type. It's a 12-byte object ID and it consists of a 4-byte timestamp representing the object's ID's creation, a 5-byte random value generated once per process, and a 3-byte incrementing counter initialized to a random value. That means that the object ID has its own format, and if the client tries to send a different format for the ID parameter here, so let's say 123 and click on send, then we got a Mongoose error saying cast to object ID is invalid. So we also should handle a better response here for the client with the correct status code as well. So inside the route, before the find by ID function, we need to check if the ID parameter the client is sending is a valid object ID. So let's add an if statement here, and Mongoose offers a function to check if the object ID is valid. So Mongoose dot, and the function is called isValidObjectID. And for the parameter, we can pass the request.params.id. And the isValidObjectID function returns true if Mongoose can cast the given value to an object ID, or false otherwise. So what we can do is add an exclamation sign here on the beginning of the if statement, and now if it's not a valid object ID, the ID parameter, and then we need to send the response to the client. So return response.status, and here we're going to use the 422 unprocessable entity status code because the client is sending an invalid data, which is the ID. And we're also going to send a JSON error. So inside the object here, just put error, and the message will be parameter is not a valid ID. Okay, so let's check on Postman. I'll just leave 123, click on send, and we got the correct status code 422, and the error parameter is not a valid ID. Perfect, so now the client actually understands what's going on. So let me put back here the JavaScript course ID and click on send. And great, so all validation is working perfectly inside the get product by ID route. So we already have a route to create a product, to get all products, and to get a specific product by ID. And we need a route to update details of an existing product. Let's create this new route below the previous route. So app dot, and we'll use the put method here, which is used to update an existing resource, in our case the product. And the name of this route is also going to be /products, and since it's going to update a specific product, so we'll also need the ID parameter here on the URL, just like on the previous route we created. And this put route will also be asynchronous, so async with the request and the response parameters, the arrow function, just like all routes we created. We're going to add the try and the catch block here as well. And we're gonna copy the error response that we're using and paste on this new route. Okay, perfect. Now inside the try block, since we're expecting an ID from the client, let's copy the object ID validation we used on the previous route and paste inside the put route. So copy in here and paste in the try block. Okay, perfect. So now we're validating the ID on the parameter. So what we can do here is store in a constant the details of the updated product and send back to the client the updated product object. So const product updated, and it's going to be equals to await because we're expecting a promise here, and the product schema, and let me scroll up here a little, and dot, and we're going to use a function called find by ID and update. The find by ID and update function, it simply grabs the document by matching a particular ID and update the data inside the document that the client sent on the request body. And for the parameters, first it expects the ID of the resource, which is the ID that we're validating here. And we can get it from the request.params.id. And the second parameter is the object data containing the fields to update. And that we can get it from the request.body, just like we use on the post route to create a product. Great, now all we need to do is return a response to the client with the product updated constant that we created. So return response.status, and this is going to be a 200 status code as well, with the JSON response containing the product update const we created here. So product updated. Okay, let's test on Postman, and let's update some details here of the JavaScript course product that we have here. So what we can do is copy this entire URL containing the ID as a parameter, open a new request, and paste on the URL field. And we need to change the method here from get to put. And now we need to send a body on the request, so body tab, and we're gonna choose the raw option here, and select the JSON type here on the dropdown. Okay, now we need to type an object here with the details that we want to update. So for example, let's update the quantity here, which is 10. So back on the put request, inside the object, we'll add the quantity here, and we're gonna update to 5. Click on send, and great, we got 200 status code, but the quantity here on the response is still 10. Let's check on the product ID request tab. The JavaScript course ID is already here. Click on send, and the quantity is 5, so that means the product was updated. So here on the put endpoint response, we are getting the old product object before we update it. And to return the updated product object, we need to add a configuration here on the find by ID and update function. So after the request.body, we can add an object here, and there's an option called new, which is false by default. So we need to change it to true. Okay, let's make sure this is working. Back on Postman, let's update the quantity now to 8 and click on send, and perfect. The quantity on the response object is 8. So we are getting the updated product object now. Let's add another field here on the object to update. So for example, the price. And now it's going to be $54.99. And click on send. Great, we got the correct updated price and the quantity, which was already 8. Now let's add a invalid object ID here on the parameter to check if our validation is working. So click on send, and we got the correct status code with the error message. And let's add an ID that doesn't exist. I'll put back the JavaScript course ID and change the last character here. And click on send, and we got null on the response. And the status code 200 OK. So we should return a better response here. So inside the route, before we call the find by ID and update function, we should check if a product exists matching the ID on the request parameter. So let's add an if statement here, and we're gonna call a function that returns a promise, and we can add the await directly inside the if statement. And we're gonna call the product schema dot, and there's a function called exists, and inside we can add an object with a filter. So we can put something like underscore ID, column, and the ID parameter. So request.params.id. The exist function returns true if at least one document exists in the database that matches the given filter, and false otherwise. We can add an exclamation sign here on the beginning of the if statement to deny all this, so if the product doesn't exist, matching the ID field with the request ID parameter, then we can copy the response from the validation inside the find product by ID route and post inside this if statement. Great, let's test this validation on Postman, and we already have here on the URL parameter an ID that doesn't exist, so just click on send, and perfect, we got the correct response with the error message saying product not found, so the validation is working. Now let's update a different product. I'll open the Get All Products tab here, and let me click on send again to fetch all products. And let's update the Node.js course here. Let me copy the ID here, open the update tab, and let's paste the ID on the URL parameter. And let's update the description field, for example, to book about building project with Node.js, Express, and MongoDB. Okay, and let's update, instead of the price, the active field. So current is true, let's update to false. Okay, click on send, and perfect, we got status code 200 okay, and the object details updated here with the new description, the active as false, and note that now we got an updated add field with the update timestamp. Let's open the Get All Products tab, click on send, and here's the Node.js product updated, the description, the active, and the updated add. Awesome, so the update endpoint is complete, and we could add more validations here. Let's say if the client is going to update the category, so we can add the validation we added on the post route to create a product. And we learned the exist function, and if we put the cursor on top of the function, the return here is not true or false. It actually returns the ID of the document if it matches the filter and no otherwise. We could use the find by ID method as well on the validation, but for learning purposes, we use the exist function, which also works. So just recapping, we have endpoints to create product, get all products, get product by ID, and update a product by ID. So now all we need to complete the CRUD example is the delete endpoint. So let's create below the put route here. So app dot, and we're going to use the delete method. The name is also /products, and just like the update and get by ID routes, we're going to delete a specific product. So we need the ID parameter here as well. And also async, and the request and response parameters, and the arrow function. Inside the function, the try and catch block, and we're already familiar with this. Let's copy our default error response and paste on the catch block. Inside the try block, since we are expecting an object ID on the request parameter, let's copy the validation we already have, checking if the ID is valid. And next, since we are deleting a product, we don't need to send the product on the response for the client because it doesn't exist anymore. So first, let's type here await and call the product schema dot. And now we're going to use the find by ID and delete function, which is used to find a matching document, removes it, and passing the found document, if there is any, to the callback. And for the parameter here, it expects the product ID, and we can get it from the request.params.id. And let's return a response to the client. So return response dot status, and here we're going to put the 204 no content status code. This status code means that the request was successful, but there's nothing to send back because the resource is not there anymore. And we can put dot here and send. Okay, the delete route is ready to test, so let's go back on Postman and let's open a new request tab here. And the URL is going to be the same we are using, so localhost 3000/products, and we need to change the method here from get to delete. Okay, now we need an ID here to pass on the parameter, so slash, and let me open the get all products tab here. And let's grab a product ID to delete. So since we have two laptops here, let's delete one of them. Let's copy the ID from this second one here. And let's open the delete request tab and let's paste the laptop ID here on the URL parameter. Let's click on send and great, we got the 204 no content status code and there's no response on the body here. So the client knows that the delete was successful by the status code. Okay, let's check if the laptop was deleted. So open the Get All Products tab and the latest response here we have two laptops. So click on send and now we have just one. So the delete endpoint is working perfectly. Back on the delete request tab, let's test some validations here. I'll change the ID parameter to an invalid ID. So 123 and click on send and great, we got the 422 status code and the message saying the ID is invalid. Now let's change back here to the laptop ID and I'll change the last character to 0. So this ID doesn't exist. Let's check the response. So click on send and we still got the 204 no content status code and the empty response body, but nothing was deleted because this product ID doesn't exist. If we check on the Get All Products tab, all products still there. So we should definitely inform the client that the product ID it's trying to delete doesn't exist. So on the delete route, we could use the exist function we used on the put route to check if the product exists. But for learning purposes, let's use something different. What you're gonna do here is get the product object by using the findById method and store on a constant. And if the product const is not null, that means the product exists. So we'll delete the product inside the constant. Let's see how this works. So below the ID validation here, let's create a new const and product, and it's equals to await the product schema dot findById. We are already familiar with this function because we use on the get product by ID route. Actually, let me copy the code we have here without the select function. And let me replace this one here. Okay, so we are getting the product by the ID on the request parameter. Next, we'll add an if statement, checking if the product constant is null. So exclamation sign and the product constant. So if it's null, that means the product doesn't exist. So we can return the correct response to the client. And we already have this response here as well. So let's copy it from the put route and paste inside this if statement. Okay, so if the product doesn't exist, we are returning the correct message with the 404 status code. Now, if the product does exist, so let's add an else statement here for the if. And what we could do is cut the findById and delete function here and paste inside this else statement. This will work normally, but since we already have the product const, so we can get rid of this here and we can use this product const here inside the else statement because this is an instance of the product schema. So we have some options inside that we can use. So inside the else here, I'll call the await and the product const with the instance of the product schema. And if we put a dot here, it will show a list of options that we can do with this product here. And there's an option called delete one. The delete one method deletes the document that is stored inside our product constant that we got from the findById method. So there are different ways we can delete a document, and this is one way to check first if the product exists and then delete that document if it does exist. Let's test these changes on Postman. So in the delete endpoint URL, we already have an ID here that doesn't exist. So let's click on send and great, we got the correct response with the 404 status code and the error message saying product not found. Now here on the Get All Products request tab, let's get another product ID to delete. So let me copy the ID of the other laptop product here. And let me paste on the delete endpoint URL. Click on send and perfect, we got the 204 status code. That means the product exists and it was deleted. Let's open the Get All Products request tab just to make sure the laptop was deleted. So as you can see, this is the old response, and if we click on send, great, the laptop is not there anymore and we only have two products now. Awesome, so we completed our CRUD application and we have endpoints to create, read, update, and delete products from our Mongo database. But we define all these routes inside our index.js file. And in the future, let's say we'll have endpoints to manipulate other resources as well. So the index.js file might get messy and too big. So we should remove all these routes from the index file and add in other files. The index file should only contain configurations from our application like Express, the MongoDB connection, and the server creation. So let's add these routes inside a route file. Here on the root, let's create a new folder called route, and we'll store the product route in a separate file inside this folder. So right click, new file, and we'll call this file product route.js. Okay, perfect. And let's copy all routes we have inside the index.js file from the delete to the first one, which is the post route. Okay, let's cut it from here and let's paste inside our product route.js file. Now we need to change some things here. We don't have the app constant in this file, so we're gonna replace with an express router function. So here on the top, let's import the router function. So const router equals to require express, and here on the end dot router function. So we are extracting the router function from inside the express module. Okay, now we need to replace all app constants we have to the router we just imported. So I'll open the find dialog on VS Code, and we're gonna find for app and replace with the router, and click on the replace all button here. Okay, so everything is replaced and we can close this dialog. Now we need to export these router functions so we can use in other files. So here on the bottom, I'll type module.exports equals to router. Now we can use the product route file inside other files. And on the index.js file, we need to initialize the product route file. So we'll do that right below the Mongoose connection functions. So app.use. And in here, we're going to require. So the index.js file is on the root, and we need to access the product route file from inside the routes folder. So inside the require, we can put dot slash, and we have access to everything on the root. So routes folder and product route file. Okay, so the routes are almost ready to use, but we still need to get the product schema import here from the top, cut, and paste on the products route file below the router import. But we need to change the path here on the product schema required. So the product route file is inside the routes folder, and we need to go back one folder and get the product schema file inside the modules folder. So here on the required, to go back one folder, we can put a dot slash, and now we're on the root. So models slash the product schema file. Great, so let's test these changes here. Let me save the index.js file here and back on Postman. Let's call the get all products endpoint, click on send, and perfect, we got all products. Let's grab the ID of the Node.js course here and paste on the URL of the get product by ID endpoint. Click on send, and oh, we got an error here. I forgot to import the Mongoose module on the products route file. So let me open the products route. Actually, let's copy the Mongoose import here from the index file and paste before the product schema import on the products route file. Okay, because we are using the Mongoose module to validate the object ID here. So let's check on Postman again. We'll just click on send, and perfect, we got the details for the Node.js course. Awesome, so our routes are working again in a separate file now, but we could improve this code a little bit more. What we can do is separate the content we have inside the routes to a different file, leaving all logic inside the routes separate from the routes declaration. We should add this logic inside functions that the name of the function already tells us what it does, like create product, get all products, get product by ID, and so on. So we'll store these functions inside a file called product controller, which will be inside a folder called controllers. So here on the root, let's create a folder called controllers. And inside, a new file called products controller.js. So inside the products controller file, we'll add all the content from inside the routes we have here, everything after the name of the route, including the request and response parameters. And let's start by copying the Mongoose and product schema imports here on the top and paste on the top of the product controller file. Now we'll create the functions here containing the logic inside the routes. So we need to export all functions so we can use in the products route file. Instead of putting module.exports on the end of the file, we can put here export dot and we can declare the function directly here. That way the function is already being exported and we can use in other files. So the first function will be create product in camel case, which is equals to, this will be an asynchronous function, so async, and the arrow function. And now we'll copy everything from the create product post route, everything inside the arrow function, and including the request and response parameters. We can cut from here and paste inside the create product arrow function after the async. Okay, so all the logic is in the controller file and we have to import this file inside the products route file. So I'll select the Mongoose and product schema imports and replace with const product controller equals to require, and we need to go inside the controllers folder. So // controllers / product controller. Now inside the post route, we can remove this async here and call the products controller dot create product. Great, so we're gonna do this for all routes here. So the next route we'll be changing is the get all products route. So I'll copy everything, including the async. So cut and let's paste inside the products controller. So we'll create another function, exports, and this one is gonna be get all products. Which is equals to, and we're gonna paste here. Okay, now inside the products route file, inside the get products route, we're gonna call the products controller. And let me just add the product here as a plural on the import and on the post route and on the get route to be exactly as the name of the file. So back on the get route dot, and we're gonna call the get all products function. Okay, now let's copy the entire code from inside the get product by ID route and let's create a new function here. So export, and this one is get product by ID equals to, and we're gonna paste right here. Okay, now we're gonna do the same thing back on the route. We're gonna put product controller dot get product by ID. Okay, same thing for the put route, copy everything. Back on the products controller, exports, and this one is update product. And we can put here by ID if you want, because we are updating the product passing the ID on the parameter. And we can put here equals, and we're gonna paste the content here. Now inside the products route file, inside the put route, we're gonna call products controller dot update product by ID. Now for the last route, which is the delete route, copy everything. And on the controller file, export, and this will be delete product, and we can put by ID as well. And equals, and we're gonna paste the content here. Okay, back on the products route, we're just gonna call here products controller dot delete product by ID. Awesome. Let me just remove these blank lines here between the routes. Perfect. We separate all logic from the routes file and put inside the controllers file. And as you can see, the routes file are totally clean and we can understand what each of these routes does by looking on the name of the function. So we know that we have a route to create, to get products, update, and delete products. Now let's test all this on Postman. We'll start by the get all products route, click on send, and perfect, it's working. Let's create a new product, and this one is gonna be an adapter. And for the description, let me copy the adapter and paste here, adapter description. The price will be 20, and we have 10 of these in stock, and the category is gonna be accessories. Okay, great. So I'm not gonna put the active here since it's true by default. Click on send and perfect. We got the new product details here on the response body. Now let's update this product. So I'll copy the ID here on the response and open the put request tab, replace here the ID and the JSON body. Let's remove this description here and update the active to false. Perfect, we got the updated details on the response. Now let me copy the ID here on the parameter and let's delete this product here. Okay, we got 204 no content and let's get all products again. So we have 2 here and let's click on send. And we still got 2 products because we delete the adapter product before calling the get all products endpoint. So everything is working perfectly and our code is complete organized. If we want to create endpoints for other resources, we can just add a route file and a controller file for that new resource. And let's do this now actually. The category here inside the product schema is defined by a none with only 3 options. But what if the client wants to create its own categories or delete a category that it doesn't use anymore? Or get all products by category? So let's create endpoints to manipulate the category as well, and we'll create a collection for the categories on the database. So let's define a new schema file for the categories. On the models folder, let's create a new file called category.js with a capital C. And let's open the product schema file and select everything here, copy, and let's paste inside the category.js schema file. And let's change the schema name here to category schema. And also here on the bottom, let's change the collection name to category. And let's replace the product schema to category schema. Now the fields, we can select all fields here and leave just the name field and remove the rest. We'll only need the name field and the created and updated add fields, so we can leave the timestamps as true. Now on the product schema file, we're going to create a relation between products and categories through the category field here. So instead of saving the category name, we're going to save the category ID. So let's remove everything here inside the category object. So select everything and delete. And the category type now it's going to be an object ID. And we can get it from the Mongoose module. So mongoose.schema.types and .object ID. Since the object ID type is a special type, we need to get it from inside Mongoose schema types, different from the string, number, the other types we are using here. And still inside the category object, we need to add an option to refer that it's related to the categories collection here. So inside the category object, this option is called ref. And it's a string and it takes the name of the collection that we are relating to. In this case, the category with a capital C. And it's still required, so we're going to put required as true. Okay, so we create a relation between the category field in the products schema to the categories schema. Now, just like for the products, we're going to create a route file for the categories. So inside the routes folder, new file, and we'll name this categories route.js. And we'll also create a controllers file. So inside the controller folder, new file, categories, controller.js. And to win some time here, what we can do is select the entire code from the products controller file, copy, and inside the categories controller, let me just close the explorer here and paste the content inside here. Perfect. Now let's replace the product schema to category. And inside the required as well, category. Okay, perfect. Now we need to change the functions here from product to category. So create category, and inside the function here, the validation is okay. We can leave the name, but we won't have the price and the category. So we can remove these validations here. And the cons here will be new category. And the await here is gonna be category. And create, okay. And on the response, we need to change the JSON here to new category. Okay, so this one looks good. Now the get all products will be get all categories. And the cons here will be categories. And await the category schema. Okay, fine, select, we don't need the version key as well. And on the response, I'll just copy here and paste it on the JSON. Okay, and the next is the get product by ID. And actually, we don't need a get category by ID. You can create one if you need, but I don't see the point here, so we can remove this one. And the next one is the update product by ID will become update category by ID. And we can leave the object ID validation here on the top. And this product schema will be category because we're validating if the category is found. So category not found. And the cons here will change category updated. And the product here will become category, find by ID and update, and all the rest is good. Just the JSON response will be category updated. The next one is the delete product by ID will become delete category by ID. Okay, we'll leave the ID validation here on the top. This const here becomes category, and the product category as well, find by ID. And we'll change all products instance here to category. Okay, and category not found. And category here, delete one, and the rest is good. Okay, so we basically change everything from product to category, and now we have CRUD functions for the categories as well. And now all we need to do is create the routes for the categories. And same thing, to win some time, let's copy all routes inside the products route file and paste inside the categories route file. And products controller will become categories controller. And we need to change on the require as well. So categories controller here. Now we need to change all these routes here and replace /products to /categories and call the functions from the categories controller. So I'll just forward the video to win some time. Okay, so we have all the routes here for the categories as well, except the get category by ID. And we need to import this categories route file inside the index.js file. So let me copy the import here for the product route file, paste below and change to categories route. Great, now let's test all categories endpoints on Postman. Now note one thing, if we call the get all products endpoint, you can see that the category field here has been deleted for all products. That's because we changed the category type on the product schema. So if you're doing this in production, make sure to do a backup of the database before applying these changes. Let's actually clean all products we have on the database. Let me open Compass here and let's click on Find to refresh the data and delete each of these products here. Perfect, so the products collection is empty. And let's click on the options button here on the top, reload data, and here's the new categories collection we created on Mongoose. So when NodeMon restart our server, after we save the changes, Mongoose creates this new collection based on the new category schema file. So now we have two collections here. Now back on Postman, if we call the get all products endpoint and click on send, we got 200 status code OK and an empty array, and that's how the response should be. Now let's organize things here on Postman. We can save all these requests here on a Postman collection. So on the left side here we have the collections option open, and to create a new collection we can click on the plus sign here on the top and choose blank collection. And on the name field here on the top, we can type the name of our collection. So let's put my API in upper camel case. Great, so the collection is created. Now we can save all endpoints inside my API collection. So let's start with the post request here and click on save here on the top. And on the dialog, select my API collection. Click on save, and now the post request is saved in my API collection. We can click on the options here to rename, so rename, and we'll call this one create product. Now for the get all products request, let's open here the tab and we're going to click on save, and my API is already selected. Let's change the request name here on the top to get all products. Okay, click on save. Great. You can see how it looks more organized here. Now let's do it for the get product by ID. Click on save and we'll change the request name here to get product by ID. And click on save. Okay, now for the update request, click on save, and the name here will be update product. Okay, click on save. And last, for the delete, click on save here, and the request name will be delete product. Okay, save again, and great. So we have all requests saved under the My API collection. And we can organize this a little bit more by clicking on the options for My API collection and choose the add folder option. And let's give a name for this folder, so product. And now we can select all requests here and drag and drop inside the products folder. Great, so under My API collection, we have the products folder, and we're gonna create another folder for the categories as well. So this new folder is called categories. And we're gonna save all categories requests inside this folder. Let me close all tabs here on the top. Okay, so let's start testing our categories endpoints. I'll open a new request here, and let's start by creating categories. So I'll change the method here to post, and the URL, I'll get the products URL saved in the history here, and we'll change to categories. And now we need to send a body, so body tab, and I'll choose the raw option and select the JSON type. And here in the body, I'll type an object, and we're gonna need the name field for the categories. So I'll name this first one here, the electronics, and click on send. Okay, we got 201 and the details of the new category. Okay, perfect. So the name field is required, so let's remove it from the body and click on send. And great, the validation is working, giving the correct response. Let me put the name back and let's save this request. And we'll choose the categories folder, and the name of the request is create category. Okay, let's save. And let's create another category, so body, and the name of this one will be books. Click on send, and great, books category is created. Let me copy this categories URL here, and let's open a new request tab to get all categories. So I'll paste right here. It's a get request, and we can click directly on send. Perfect, so here are the two categories we created on the response array. Great, so we can save, and it's already select the categories folder, and let's name this one get all categories. Okay, let's save. Perfect, let me close these tabs here on the top, and we'll open a new request tab to test the update endpoint. So I'll change the method here to put, and for the URL, I'll select the categories from the history here, and we'll need to pass a category ID. So let me open the get all categories request here, click on send, and let's update the books category. So I'll copy the ID here, and on the put request tab, let's type the body first. So body tab, raw, and select JSON. Let's create an object here on the body with the name field, and we'll change to courses. Now we need to paste the book ID here on the URL, so slash and paste. Click on send, and great, book was updated to courses. Let's check by calling the get all categories endpoint, and perfect. Let's test some validation. So back on the put request tab, I'll change the ID here to 123, click on send, and we got the response 422, parameter is not a valid ID. Now let me put the courses ID back on the parameter, and I'll change the last character here to 0, so this ID doesn't exist. Click on send, and we got the category not found error message. So the validations are working perfectly as well. Okay, so let's save this update request, and we'll name this one to update category. Okay, let's save. Perfect. Now we need to test the delete endpoint. So what I'll do here is select the update URL that already has the courses ID as a parameter, copy, and I'll open a new request here. But before, let's create a new category. So I'll open the create category request, and on the body, I'll change the name here to books, and click on send, and the books category is created. And let's just make sure by calling the get all categories endpoint, and click on send, and yes, the books category is created. So now we can delete the courses category. So I'll open the new request tab from before and change the method here from get to delete, and the URL will be the categories URL with the courses ID as a parameter. Okay, we can click on send, And we got the 204 no content status code. That means the courses category was deleted, but let's check by calling the get all categories endpoint. Okay, click on send, and yes, now we only have electronics and books as categories. So we can save the delete request to the collection, and we'll name it as delete category. Awesome, so we have all products and categories tested and saved on Postman collection. Let me close these tabs here on the top. Okay, now we need to create new products passing the categories we have on our database. But for that, we need to change the post route in our project. So I'll open the product controller here, and inside the create product function under the category validation, since it's still a required field on the schema, so we can leave the if statement checking if the category is on the request body. And now we need to change this else if statement here, because we need to check if the category exists on the database and not on the none anymore. So what I'll do here is remove this entire statement, and now we need to check if the category on the request body exists on the categories collection on the database. For that, we need to import the category schema on the top. So right below the product schema import, I'll type const category with a capital C equals to required, and inside // and the models folder / category. Okay, now back on the create product function on the else if statement, we can add an exclamation, await, and the category schema. And here we can use the exists or define by ID function to check if the category is available on the database. Let's use the find by ID because we have the category ID on the request body. So inside request.body.category. Okay, so if we can't find the category, then we'll send the correct response to the client. So we can remove this error message here, and now will become category not found. Great, now the post create product route is expecting a category ID on the body. So let's test on Postman, and let's open the create product request, and on the body tab inside the object, let's change a few things here. So the name, we'll put Node.js book, and on the description, I'll just put description here. And for the price, this one is $29.99. We'll leave the quantity as 10. And now for the category, we need to pass a category here. So let's open the get all categories request, and we'll click on send, and let's copy the books category here. Now back on the create product request, we'll paste the category ID on the category field, and we can click on send. And here it is. The new product now has the category saved from the categories collection. Let's open the get all products request to check, and click on send, and perfect. Here's the category ID inside the product object. But as you can see here, it's returning only the ID of the category, and the client might not know which category is this by the ID. So we can send the category on the response as an object containing more details like the name as well. So let's do that. Inside the products controller file on the get all products function, right after this select method on the find method, Mongoose has an option here called populate, which let us reference documents from other collection. And as a parameter, it expects the field we want to return the entire object details. So inside, let's put the category field, and that's it. Simple as that. We can go back to Postman. So here on the response, we have the category ID only, but if we click on send, awesome. Now we have the category field as an object containing all details. So the client knows which category is related to the product. And we can actually select the fields that we want to show here. So back on the get all products function, inside the populate method, we can replace the category to an object. And to inform the field, we can use the path key and expect the name of the field, so category. And to select the fields, we can add the select key here, which we are already familiar with it. So here we can put the ID and the name field, for example. Okay, so let's see how it looks on Postman. I'll just click on send. And perfect. Now the category object has only the ID and the name field. Let me copy the product ID here, and let's open the get product by ID request. paste here as a parameter, click on send, and here we need to change as well because the category is only showing the ID. So let's change on the get product by ID function, and actually we can copy the populate method from the get all products function and paste after the select method here on the get product by ID function. Now back on Postman, I'll just click on send here, and perfect. Now the category is an object containing the ID and the name, just like the get all products endpoint. Now let's create another category here. So I'll open the create category request, and we already have the electronics category on the database. So if we try to create this again, so let me click on send, and it is created, but now we have duplicate data on the database. So if we check here on the get all categories request, there it is. We have 2 electronics categories created. So let's add a validation to avoid this. And back on the code, we can open the categories controller, and inside the create category function, we can add an if statement checking if the category name already exists on the database. So before we call the create function and after validating if the name is on the request body, let's add an if statement here, checking on the category collection. So await and the category schema dot, and we're going to use a method called find one, which is going to return the first document object from a filter. So inside the method, we can add an object, and we're going to filter by name. So name equals to the request dot body.name. Perfect. So if we find a category with the same name from the name on the request body, let's return response to the client. So return response dot status, and here we're going to use the 409 status, which means a conflict. Okay, every time we try to add something that already exists, we can return this code. And we're also going to send a JSON response with an error inside the object and backticks, and inside the category, and I'm going to put a $sign and curly brackets, and request.body.name already exists. Great. Now let's test on Postman and open the create category request tab, and let's try to create the electronics category again. So click on send, and perfect. We got the 409 conflict status code and the error message saying the category electronics already exists. So validation is working, and let's try to create a new category. So accessories, for example. Click on send, and great, the accessories category is created. Awesome. So MongoDB is not a relational database. We can use, of course, relations, but we have to handle all the details on the backend. So for example, here on the Node.js book product, we are using the books category. But what happens if we try to delete the books category? So let's open the delete category request here and paste the book category ID on the URL parameter. Click on send, and we got 204 no content status code. That means the category was deleted. And if we open the get all products request tab and click on send, as you can see, the category for the Node.js book is null. And that's an issue because on the product schema, we define the category as required true. So before deleting a category, we need to check if there are products using that category. So let's open the categories controller, and inside the delete category by ID function, we need to check on the products collection how many products are using the category we're trying to delete. So first thing we need to do is import the product schema right below the category. So const product equals to required, and inside we're going to put the models folder / product. Okay, now back on the delete category by ID function. So we're checking if the category ID sent on the request parameter exists. So here inside the else statement, before we call the delete one function, we'll create a const that will store how many products are using the category we're trying to delete. So const, and we'll call this products count, which is equals to await, and we'll bring the product schema here. And we're going to use a method called count documents, and it's used to count the number of documents that match the filter we define. So for the parameter, we'll add an object and we're gonna filter for the category field. And the category ID, we can get it from the category const we have here or from the request parameter ID. So in here, I'll just put the category const dot underscore ID field. So here we'll have the number of products using the category we're trying to delete. Now, all we have to do is check if the products count is greater than 0. So if product count greater than 0, and then we're going to return response dot, and the status code here, we'll also use the 409 conflict as well, because we are trying to delete something that's being used for some other resource. And a JSON response here with the object inside and the error message. I'll add backticks here. So we're gonna put something like category, and I'm gonna put a $sign and curly brackets, and we're gonna get the category from the constant dot name is being used in $sign curly brackets, and inside we'll put the product count constant here. And in here we'll put product like this. So the error message is going to be something like the category name is being used in 10 products maybe. And it won't proceed with the delete. Okay, so let's check on Postman. And let's create a new product by opening the Create Product tab here. And we'll name this one Adapter. And we'll leave the rest as it is. And for the category, let's get the accessories category ID recreated. So on the Get All Categories tab, let's copy the accessories ID here. Okay, and now back on the Create Product, we'll just paste here on the category. Click on Send. And okay, the new adapter product is created. Now let's try to delete this category. So I'll copy the ID here and I'll paste on the parameter and click on Send. Okay, now we got the 409 conflict and the message saying category accessories is being used in one product. Okay, so our validation is working. And let's try to delete another category. So on the Get All Categories tab, let me copy one of the electronics ID we have here. And on the Delete Category tab, let's paste here on the parameter, click on Send, and perfect. We got the 204 no content. And let's just check here on the Get All Categories tab, click on Send, and yes, the category was deleted. Now, when we try to delete a category that was being used in the products collection, on the error message, we just received the number of products that we're using that category, but we don't know which products are those. So the client might need an endpoint to get all products by a specific category. So let's create that new endpoint. And we'll create the function inside the products controller. So right below the get products by ID function, let's create a new one. So export, and we'll name this one get products by category. And just like the other functions we created, it's going to be equals to async and the request and response parameters and the arrow function, and inside the try and catch with the error object block. We are very familiar with this already. Let's copy the error message we have here and copy on the catch. Okay. Now inside the try block, we're going to create a const that will store all products from a certain category, and that category ID the client will send on the request parameter. So let's open the products route file and let's create a new route for this function. Below the get product by ID, we'll put the router.get and the name will be /products. And now we're going to put /category. And we need the category ID on the parameter. So /column category ID. Note that now it's a category ID and not a product ID. Okay, so back here on the route, let's put a comma here and call the products controller dot get products by category. Okay, so the route is defined back on the products controller inside the get products by category function. So the first thing we need to do is check if the category the client is sending exists on the database. So let's add an if statement here, exclamation sign, await, and the category schema dot, and here we're going to use the find by ID. And inside we're going to get the ID from the request dot params dot category ID. Okay, so if that category doesn't exist, we need to send back the response for the client. Okay, so return response, and the status code here will be 404 not found, and the JSON message with the error. So let's put here error, and the message will be category not found. Great, so if the category was found, we need to get all products that are using that category. So const products, and it's equals to await, and the product schema dot find. And we already used the find method, but without a filter. So let's add a filter here by the category field, and it's going to be equals to the request dot params dot category ID. Perfect. Now what we can do is copy the select and populate methods that we already defined here on the get product by ID route, and paste in this new get products by category route. So let's copy till the select here, and let's paste right after the find here. Great, so we are removing the version key field and populating the ID and name for the category field. And let's copy the response as well and paste right below this products const. Okay, and inside the JSON here, we need to change it to products and not product, just like the constant over here. Okay, now let's test on Postman this new route. And before we test, let's create a new product with the same category from the adapter product, which is the accessories category. Okay, so this new product will be the keyboard, and I'll leave the description as it is, and the price will be $79.99, the quantity 10, and the same category. Okay, all good with the data here, so we can click on send. And great, product created. Let's check on the get all products tab, click on send. Perfect, now we have the adapter and the keyboard products with the same category. Okay, and the Node.js book is actually new here. Let's ignore it for now, and let's use these two other products. So I'll open a new request tab here, and this one is also a get, and I'll select the product URL here and add a slash category, and let's get the accessories category ID. Let's copy, and back on the new route, let's put a slash here and paste the ID. Click on send. And great, we got all products that are using the accessories category ID, which is the keyboard and adapter, with all the information that the client needs. Let's create another product using a different category. And let's use the electronics category now. So on the request body, let's change the name to laptop and the price to 300. The quantity will leave just one. And the category will paste the electronics category ID. Okay, click on send, and the laptop is created. Now let's open the get products by category ID endpoint, pasting the electronics category ID here. Click on send, and great, we receive only one product, which is the laptop. And let's save this new request on the products folder, and the name is gonna be get products by category. Okay, let's save. And perfect. And let's clean all these tabs here on the top. So I'll just close all of them here so we can have a clean environment. Okay, delete and the get product. Okay, perfect. So we created collections for all routes on our project. And back on VS Code, let me open the Explorer here and let me close all tabs on the top. Okay, perfect. And as you can see here, the structure of our REST API project is very organized. We separate the model files, the route files, and the logic on the controller files. And on our main index file, we are using only to configure Express, the database connection, and configure the route. So everything is very clean. One last thing we can change is on the categories route file. All routes start with a slash categories. And on the products route file, same thing. So in the index.js file, we can configure the path of these routes. So right here on the app use, before the required, we can add the slash products over here. And then we add a comma and then the required products route. And for the categories, we can do the same. So in here will be slash categories and comma and the categories route file. Okay, now inside the categories here, all we need to do is to remove the categories here on the beginning of the routes. Okay, and on the products route, same thing. So we just remove the products on the beginning. Okay, let's just make sure these changes are working. So on Postman, I'll just open the Get All Products tab here, and we'll click on Send, and okay, we got the products. Now for the Get All categories, Send. Okay, so everything is working perfectly. So now if we need to change the path of the routes, we only need to change in one place. Awesome, so in this video we learned how to create a complete REST API using CRUD operations with Node, Express, and MongoDB using the Mongoose module. We learned quite a few helpful methods and functions from Mongoose. We learned how to organize the endpoints on Postman, and we also learned how to create a cluster on MongoDB Atlas. I'll leave the project's GitHub repo link on the description below. Thank you so much for watching, and please subscribe on the channel so we can make more videos like this. See you on the next video.